Welcome to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke, and today's guest is Tamar George. She is a psychic coach, artist, and author of several books, including Reborn in Time. Today, we're going to talk about the misuse of power that began in Atlantis, and in her book, she traces how the magic of Atlantis was misused for personal gains throughout history. Tamar, welcome back to the show.
It's nice to be with you again.
Your last episode had a very nice reception. I get the feeling more and more people are warming up to the idea of reincarnation, as a lot of people are talking about it these days. So, Atlantis, are we going back to the past or are we going back to the future? How did you remember lives going back that far?
I seem to be encoded within my memory of that lifetime. When I started writing about it, I was there. And I could only write for like 20 minutes a day because it was so intense. It was like I was in Atlantis living out the story and listening to my guides at the same time. And 20 minutes I was done because psychic ability gets you exhausted. So I really believe I was downloaded with the information before I even came here. I remembered.
The curious person is going to ask questions like, okay, Atlantis, first of all, how long ago was it? Was it 10,000 years ago? 20,000? What was it like? What did the people look like? What did they sound like?
Well, the agreement online is that Atlantis sunk between 12 to 10,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so when I tell you that it lasted 20 million years, it's really going to bring up a lot of doubt because this planet has been around for a long time. So let's just imagine. We don't have to believe it because there's nothing you can prove at all.
Of course.
Let's just say there were a group of beings that decided this beautiful Earth needed populated. And so they came from Sirius, Venus, the Pleiades. Now, that information is out there.
This is the first time I've interviewed someone that actually talked about the origins. I'm not really sure what you would call those people.
Well, we're all star beings, so we talked the last time about having many multiple lives in other dimensions and other places because we are multidimensional. So we have eternity to do this in. So 20 million years in eternity is a blink. It really is. So we are always out exploring other places. We're creators. So we came here to create. And we did a great job of it when we first got here because we remembered our connection to Source. Mm-hmm. We didn't know how to misuse power. Legends talk about, from the Hopi to all over the planet, that there was a time that there was a paradise on Earth, a golden age. They all talk about their motherland sinking. But these stories are told by ancient bards, by reciter priests, and they claimed a time when their kings were from the one true blood.
What is the one true blood?
Being from the stars and then being from Atlantis.
I can't help but think it's a very good idea for a band name, One True Blood, playing at the Roxy this week. I've never heard that before.
Well, while I'm on that subject, the Egyptians, their pharaohs, were from the one true blood. That's why they intermarried. That's why they were honored as the pharaohs. So they were trying to keep that one true bloodline alive.
So Tamar, did you have multiple lifetimes on Atlantis and maybe in other lands as well, or?
Well, the one I write about in the book was just one particular lifetime, but yes, I've had many lifetimes there. But I remembered one.
You're saying the timeline stretches back to almost infinity, is what you're saying.
Seems like it.
I think anything's possible. Well, within reason anyway. In this one particular incarnation, can you describe what the people look like? What kind of clothes did they wear? Did they speak a language that we've never heard before?
The original Atlanteans were very, very albino looking. Their skin was translucent. You could see the blood work in the skin. They had white hair really, really intense blue eyes. I'm not saying that this was a superior race by any means, as we know of racism right now. It's just the way they looked. And they were 6'2". So they were very tall. And I can't imagine translucent skin would be that gorgeous. So I just want to put that out there.
That's interesting. I never heard that.
What we wore was we would literally looking like Romans. We would wrap a sheet around us, and then we would have a shoulder piece, and then we would have a cape. Each color of the cape, different colors of the different capes, meant where your service was, because the Atlanteans were in service to one another and to all that is, the law of one, the law of one love. We were in service. So it was a very beautiful, magnificent life. Now, the language, I'm not sure. My brain probably couldn't interpret it. But the names that I were getting were very Greek sounding. So that was really interesting.
So what kind of magic was used in Atlantis?
At that time, in those different groups, there were called magicians, basically. And they would come together with group thought, and they would create and fuse crystal together. Then these particular crystals could be morphed into anything that a ship or a flight ship, or then they would be solar powered. They were very, very advanced to using the earth energy. So the earth energy definitely has geomagnetic energy from the planet, and then the galactic magnetic energy coming towards the planet was creating a way to really manifest with. Plus the ley lines. You've heard of ley lines around the planet, like energy grids. So you also had that energy. So with thought, with the belief, with the trust, with all of that energy, boom, you could really create something.
What you're describing, is that similar to what other people have described as a 5D or fifth density civilization, where their consciousness was advanced, their technology was advanced, and they just had abilities that obviously we in the present day do not have?
Yes.
Telepathy was common?
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
There wasn't a lot of fear, so you didn't need this whole language that we associate with fear, and a language that was power over others.
Interesting point. I've heard people talk on the show about the great year cycle, great year concept, where consciousness goes up and down and cycles. And apparently, I think what you're about to explain has something to do with basically not just the fall of Atlantis, but basically the peak of consciousness. Then it goes into somewhat of a dark age. Am I right?
Yes. So what happened with the Atlanteans is over that time period, things just got corrupted. People were forgetting what their source connection was, and they were getting more ingrained into the earth. What they started to do was use the crystals against one another, or to have power and control over one another. When I say the great city of Atlantis sunk 10 to 12,000 years ago, that's not that long ago.
Not really. And we've heard lots of different theories about where Atlantis was. Do you know where it was located?
I do. When I say this, remember that there are a lot of people with a lot of different theories. I'm not even going to say that their theory is wrong, because Atlantis had outposts, sister cities. In those areas, yes, it was an outpost. It was a sister city. It was a satellite. But the main land that the city was in was called Tula, and that's Thula. And that is where we know England, Scotland,
Really?
and Ireland are.
Cool. I like that. Just to digress just a tiny bit, there's a show on the Gaia Network. I believe his name is Matthias Di Stefano. He has actually two different series about Atlantis. Have you ever seen that?
I know who he is. I have not actually watched the whole series.
That's probably discussion for a different day, but apparently he remembers lifetimes. And he actually goes into detail about what some of these lands and civilizations were actually named, like Lemuria, according to him, are actually even older than Atlantis. So tell us more about the magic and how it began to be misused.
Well, with that misuse of crystal and the actual sinking, the Atlanteans had moved out from the city for thousands of years, and they went to settle in the different outposts, which would be the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Egyptians, and around the world where many of these satellite cities were. When we look at this, we realize that the technology was very similar. The way they created their buildings, the way they painted their buildings, their astrology, their priests, their king. There was all these similarities within each of these civilizations, and yet they weren't supposed to have any connection with each other.
Right. How did they have similar looking pyramids in different outposts, maybe?
Right.
Literally around the planet. It's a bit hard to explain that. And apparently their technology was very, very advanced. We're not even close to that, I don't think.
Right. So early on, they were the teachers. They went out on their crystal ships and taught at the different outposts.
Did you actually say crystal ships?
I did.
So do you think that maybe Jim Morrison had some past life memories or encoding, as it were? What are your thoughts?
Well, I believe people just say things or think things, and they don't remember why the concrete knowledge of where it's coming from. So, of course.
Crystal Ships. It's
Yes.
actually a very good song, too.
Crystal ships.
And speaking of which, you have some memories of the early sea people and the travel. But before we get to that, I wanted to ask you about the helicopter hieroglyphs. I believe it's a carving in a temple. The one I'm thinking of has two men that have these rods, and it seems like there's this giant rock above them. Is that the same thing, or is it something different?
This is in the temple in Abydos on the ceiling, because I saw it. Type in helicopter hieroglyphs.
Go see it.
They will all see it.
Now, that's an example of 5D or fifth density abilities, because the legend, anyway, is that the pyramids were built with some sort of divining rods. It wasn't just like manual blood and sweat labor. Am I right?
Well, again, there's lots of theories on that. And through time, I'm sure that the different techniques changed. But I happen to believe it was sound. You can do a lot with sound. You can destroy stuff with sound.
So it's a certain type of frequency.
Yes, you can also build things with sound. So these hieroglyphs, they call them the helicopter hieroglyph because there is an image that looks exactly like a helicopter. There are other images that look straight out of Star Wars. And the things that we see are friends in Star Wars flying around on. So it's fascinating. Now, the experts, the Egyptologists say, they're broken hieroglyphs. You know what? The Egyptians never created broken hieroglyphs.
Just so our listeners know this, what is a broken hieroglyph?
They were saying that somehow they were destroyed or the images were not the way they should have been. They were making all kinds of excuses because they didn't know what it was. But the Egyptians were recording their past, their history. They remembered.
Speaking of remembering, do you remember seeing flying machines in Egypt or Atlantis for that matter?
No, when I was there, I was going about my daily work, my service to others, trying to have that higher consciousness. I don't know if it was in a different time period. I think it was more towards the end of Atlantis that my story was happening before the fall.
What do you know about the sea people and sea travel?
When I was in the Temple of Abydos and the guide was showing me with a flashlight on the ceiling the actual helicopter hieroglyph, there was also hieroglyphs of sea people that traveled around the world. More history that the Egyptians were recording. I think this was probably the later Atlanteans that were moving out and moving around the world. Now, when I was in the Canary Islands, I got to go to the Thor Heyerdahl Museum and see the reed ships. The reed ships are made out of reeds. They're like straw tied together, and they could float on the oceans, on the Gulf Stream for about 3 months before they sunk. So they were traveling all around the world way before history has pointed out that we were actually traveling.
What else can you tell us about the early civilizations like Atlantis from things that you remember?
Well, Atlantis had a pyramid, and it also had temples, 2 sets of temples rotating in a circle around the pyramid. And those temples were dedicated to science, to what they considered was their philosophy, their magic, and all the things that they needed in daily life. These temples looked very much like they do in Greece. So I really believe that the Greeks are definitely a memory or a satellite city of Atlantis. There was a shipping port. It was on a horseshoe cove. If you look around the world, there are a lot of cities built on like a cove, a horseshoe, so that it could easily be traveled in and out by ships. Some of them lived up in the mountains, the hills, like Anasazi Indians. So they actually had ladders and hilltop houses. Back to Greece. If you've ever been to Santorini and you see the white stucco houses built, somebody's porch is somebody's roof and on and up, and they build like that. They're still doing that.
What you're saying is that's ancient architecture. They had buildings that were similar.
Yes, yes. Or they originated those buildings and later on people replicated them. Mm-hmm. And I bet you they replicated them from memory, because if you were many lifetimes in Atlantis, you remembered.
So how did the fall actually transpire? What were the events that preceded that period?
Well, it was definitely the power over others. And I think that really is our theme, because we're seeing that around the world right now. I want power over you so I can control you. That way I'll have what I want, need, desire, whatever. And it was the same sort of thing, except they used something as crystal, and I don't have a brain for how they would create some kind of destruction out of that. It blew up and the great city sunk, but not all of the rest of the land, because we still have England, we still have Scotland. Scotland, by the way, is built on huge quartz crystal. When I was there, the light was shining out of the earth. As an artist, a painter, I was just fascinated with this light. And my friend said, well, we're standing on pure quartz. And I go, oh my gosh, that's it. It's just being reflected down and coming and being reflected right back up again.
What can we learn from this story going forward?
Yeah. And ask myself that question, because what happened was we did go into the dark ages. The grid around the planet was shifted, and it really was, you're not going to have the power to create like you did, or you will destroy this planet. So we were plunged into the dark ages, and all the different satellite cities, the Aztecs, the Mayans, and Egyptians were trying to recreate that magic. They were desperate to recreate it, but they just weren't making a go of it. So then it morphed into people having superstition. They were creating magical tokens, like the priests in Egypt. You had to pay them for their prayer or their token, whatever they were going to give you. So a lot of what they were figuring out was working is they still could create weather conditions if they had a drought. They were realizing if they put a pregnant person in a field, their crops would grow better. Now, what's that about? Like energy attracts like energy. Thoughts are things.
Thoughts are things.
Yes. So we create what's positive. We also create what's negative. So then they thought, well, if one is good, well, if the king wants life, then like the Aztecs, let's kill all of these people. And at one time they killed like 20,000 people so that life would continue, that they would have the good stuff. It got totally out of control.
So a shift in consciousness going from service, serving others, to service of self, greed, avarice, all those not very good things, basically plunged our consciousness into a downturn, almost like you're looking at a stock market graph where things like telepathy and other sensibilities just basically disappeared. That's what it sounds like.
It did. And then groups of people decided how they could have control over us. And that was through politics and religion. And when we watch the news today or read a newspaper or go online and figure out what's going on in the world, same stuff.
You had other lifetimes, I think, in Egypt and maybe one as a Celt. Did you tend to remember any of the past lives? Let's say like you had a past life in Egypt. Were you aware of past lives before, like in Atlantis?
I don't believe so. No, not at all. In fact, I believe I know more about Atlantis now than when I lived there.
Really?
Yeah. When you think about it, there's so much more consciousness or knowing or intellect or a broader picture on things that if you and I looked back on this lifetime in the future, we would know a whole lot more about that time period.
Good point. I'm just curious about the living quarters, the dwellings. Did it look primitive, like the interiors? What did the floors look like and the furniture and that type of thing? What did you use for lighting? Do you remember any of that?
Well, I think a lot of it was solar, but when I saw the buildings, everything was pristine, especially the temples were gorgeous. We had the temple by the sea, and the water was just astounding because Atlantis was more downward towards the Canary Islands. There were water fountains. There was foliage. As far as floors, I don't remember seeing much detail to that other than this is stone. It was more natural, more Frank Lloyd Wright.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I know that you paint. Did you ever try to recreate any scenes from your life then?
Yes, a bunch of them.
Okay. That's definitely something I'd like to see. Do you think we can ever get back to the point where we're living in an advanced society in terms of consciousness, not just technology? Do you think we'll see that in our lifetime or probably not?
I see that there's going to be a rough period here for a while, but in 2012, the grid shifted back. So in Atlantis, the grid was shifted to not having any power. But in 2012, we as light workers said, we will be responsible for this power. Give us one more chance. And there was enough of us that said that in different events. One was the 11/11. And these were events where I called them pieces of the puzzle, held all over the world with different light workers. So that consciousness of the light workers is raised. And hopefully everybody is living love. But the grid has shifted, and this is why we're seeing such a downfall, the end of the patriarchy, because now we have to come into unity. And the Aquarian Age was always the promise of unity. It was always the promise of that power, that glory time, that golden age will be back. Atlantis is back. It has risen through the people here, doing the work, living love, having a higher consciousness.
It's just that we might not see it in this lifetime. I've had people tell me that in 2012 something changed. It wasn't the end of the world. It was, like you say, the beginning of a shift. Is there anything else that you want to talk about regarding the ancient civilizations?
Just, I think that we need to learn from history. I really think that history repeats itself, and we're doing that in the United States right now, where we're reliving things that we thought were finished and complete. So what can we learn from history on what not to do and why not to do it? And what really is the benefit of living love?
I think you said it with a conscious shift that was 10 years ago, but I guess you have to start someplace. Hopefully, as a civilization, we will get back to that and not make the same mistakes as we did before. What else can you say?
Live love.
Yeah.
And we are responsible for everything. That's a problem because there is karma. So we get that karma back when we are not responsible for being the most loving, kind, just caring, compassionate individuals.
I would agree, but there seems to be an awful lot of fear and hatred and bad stuff happening now. Hopefully this is the storm before the calm.
So the energy here is a do-over. Look at what's going on astrologically. It's mind-blowing. This energy is coming into the planet for this do-over. That's the basis of what I wanted to get across is I'm so hopeful. We are going to make it through this. We can't get discouraged, and we can just individually learn how to live love. That's the key.
I agree. That's what I'm hearing from other intuitives as well. And that's a good note to end on. Tamar, thanks again for joining us. How can our listeners learn more about you online?
They can find me at tamargeorge.com. It's TAMAR George, GEORGE.com. I have the first podcast up on my site, and when this goes up, I'll put it on there too.
You've been listening to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing. You can also leave us a review on iTunes as well. For more information, please go to closertovenus.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.